Two Royal Navy submarines, HMS Safari and Unbroken, lie in wait for their prey off the coast of Panarea near Sicily. The Italian 3rd Cruiser Division, led by Admiral Angelo Parona, comes into view through their periscopes. The 4 cruisers and 4 destroyers have no idea of their presence. Unbroken's skipper, Lieutenant Alistair Mars, knows this is Parona's force and launches his attack. Unbroken drifts silently and concealed under the waves from 2 Italian reconnaissance seaplanes, and then the submarine slips beneath the destroyer screen itself. All that lies ahead of Unbroken now are the cruisers themselves, unaware of the danger. Spotting that his targets are slowing down, Mars orders his crew to fire, and within seconds, 4 torpedoes are underway. The Pedestal convoy continues towards Malta. Preparations are made for another day of intense air attacks after a costly night of running the gauntlet of Axis submarines and motor torpedo boats. With the convoy closing in on Malta, they also close distance with Italian airfields in Sicily. Axis air forces will hit hard and in numbers. Unbroken's actions form part of a larger effort from both the Royal Navy and Royal Air Force to protect the Pedestal convoy on its perilous journey through the Mediterranean towards the precariously situated island of Malta. The island fortress sits south of Sicily, a danger to Axis supply lines, and has thus been subjected to the largest aerial bombardments of the war in an effort to subdue her. After over 2 years under siege and with little supply left, Malta is in desperate need of resupply. The Royal Navy has dispatched a heavily armed convoy to keep her in the fight. As the convoy has transited through the western and central Mediterranean, it has been subjected to a violent spate of attacks by submarines, motor torpedo boats and aircraft. With one carrier, HMS Eagle, sunk, and another, HMS Indomitable, crippled, the Royal Navy has already taken major damage forging its path onto Malta. Its losses are worsened by the loss of light cruisers Cairo and Manchester and the destroyer Foresight, and the damages dealt to the light cruisers Nigeria and Kenya, and destroyers Wolverine and Ithuriel. It isn't just the convoy's escorts who have taken a beating transiting the dangerous waters of the central Mediterranean. So too have the precious merchantmen themselves. Clan Ferguson, Deucalion, Empire Hope, Glenorchy, Almeria Likes, Santa Elisa and Wairangi have all succumbed to a multitude of Axis attacks. And with Ohio, Brisbane Star and Rochester Castle all damaged, only Port Chalmers, Melbourne Star, Dorset and Waimārama remain so far unscathed. To the convoy's north in the Tyrrhenian Sea lies a force of Italian warships commanded by Admiral Alberto Dazzara. Dazzara's force is one not to be underestimated. His own 7th Cruiser Division comprises 3 light cruisers, and Admiral Angelo Parona's 3rd Cruiser Division comprises 3 heavy cruisers. Accompanying them sails destroyers from the 10th, 11th and 13th Destroyer Divisions, numbering some 13 in all. In Rome, Admiral Arturo Riccardi, commander of the Regia Marina's headquarters, the Super Marina, grows increasingly wary of the risks of allowing his precious warships to engage in confusing night action against the Royal Navy. Knowing that larger battles are yet to come with the Royal Navy, Riccardi knows better than to induce unnecessary costly losses. As news reaches Admiral Riccardi's desk that reinforcements from Vice Admiral Neville Seyffert's Force Z had rejoined the Pedestal convoy, joined by the threat of air attacks posed by RAF Malta Command, he orders Dazzara to abort his attack, having advanced no further south than 50 kilometers northwest of Sicily. As Dazzara's 7th Cruiser Division withdraws onto Naples, and Admiral Parona's 3rd Cruiser Division towards the port of Messina, little do they know, lurking nearby is HMS Unbroken, a U-class submarine of the Royal Navy lying in ambush, waiting for the perfect moment to launch her devastating attack. This video is sponsored by our own Patreon community. Patreon supporters enjoy early access to full series and regular standalone videos, completely ad and sponsor free, behind the scenes updates, and access to our patron-only Discord community, where you can chat directly with us and fellow history connoisseurs. If you enjoy what we produce and would like to support us to continue, we'd really appreciate your support for as little as $5 a month at patreon.com/The Operations Room. In the early hours of the 13th of August, Unbroken patrols off the island of Panarea, knowing the deep water channel nearby will be used by Admiral Parona's 3rd Cruiser Division. As the sun rises at 7:25 am, HMS Unbroken's skipper, Lieutenant Alistair Mars, watches as a line of warships approach from the west. 4 cruisers in line astern, with 4 destroyers on either beam. Lieutenant Mars positions Unbroken for the perfect strike and creeps closer, passing beneath the port destroyer screen, leaving the submarine 3,000 yards from the line of cruisers. These cruisers slow to allow one to launch her seaplane, and Mars gives the order to fire. He launches a spread of 4 torpedoes ahead of him, before quickly turning away and diving to avoid the inevitable depth charging. With the torpedoes racing towards the cruisers, lookouts aboard spot their tracks and call out, desperately hoping their ships might turn and comb the tracks. The cruisers Gorizia and Trieste turn with haste and comb the torpedoes' paths, leaving Bolzano and Muzio Attendolo to their fate. As Bolzano tries to complete her turn, one torpedo smashes into her port quarter, blowing a hole in her hull, and igniting a major fire that begins to spread. As Bolzano takes on water, her skipper, Capitano Mario Mezzadra, orders her to turn for the nearby shoreline, destined to ram his cruiser onto the beach. Though this act will spare many of the crew from drowning, the heavy cruiser will remain out of action for the remainder of the war. As Bolzano turns for the shoreline, the light cruiser Muzio Attendolo is struck. The torpedo explosion shears her bow, as far as her A turret, completely off. Admiral Perona's escorting destroyers part with the cruisers and begin hunting Unbroken, marking the beginning of a 45-minute depth charging attack that will end in nothing. Muzio Attendolo's quick-thinking captain orders the sealing off of the warship's damaged compartments, preventing her from sinking. Morning breaks on the 13th of August, bringing with it clear and cloudless skies for the Pedestal convoy. With such clear and bright weather, Rear Admiral Burrough knows his force will have to endure a day of unrelenting air attacks. Like clockwork, the day's first wave of Axis aircraft comes into view against the blue sky. From the convoy's northwest edge, lookouts aboard the merchantman Dorset reports 12 Ju-88s passing overhead, heading for the abandoned but still floating merchantman Santa Elisa. They approach the stricken merchantman, and one lone Ju-88 dives in, dropping its ordnance over the ship. 3 bombs explode on her deck and rapidly expedite her descent beneath the waves. Santa Elisa's final act, as a target for the enemy bombers, serves as a much-needed distraction that affords Burrough time to reorganise his convoy. Whilst directing the merchantman Melbourne Star, having lost her way, to rejoin the convoy under escort from the destroyer Ashanti, orders are given to the destroyers Eskimo and Somali to detach and search for the town-class light cruiser HMS Manchester, who has long been radio silent since a torpedo attack just that morning. With Eskimo and Somali away, Burrough's force makes the most of the momentary silence to reform. The light cruiser Charybdis slots herself ahead of a column of 3 merchantmen, Rochester Castle, Waimarama and Melbourne Star. Ranged on each beam are the destroyers Fury, Icarus, Intrepid and Pathfinder. Close by, the light cruiser Kenya and destroyer Ashanti screen the merchantman Port Chalmers. 2 miles off their port quarter is the merchantman Dorset, escorted by destroyer Bramham. Far behind the main body of the Pedestal convoy, some 5 miles astern, is the crucial oiler Ohio, under escort by the destroyer Ledbury. As Burrough orders Port Chalmers and Dorset to attempt to rejoin the main convoy, lookouts report 12 fast-approaching Ju-88s to the north. With lookouts' binoculars focused on the approaching bombers, they watch as 3 Ju-88s press the attack first, diving down to the convoy's stern, entering into its emerging anti-aircraft barrage. Under orders to weave, the merchantmen do what they can to avoid the approaching bombers, as they release their ordnance and break for home. The merchantmen continue to make hard turns as the bombs straddle the water around them. As Waimarama completes her weave, 4 bombs slam into her deck astern of her funnel. The final bomb ignites her stockpiles of munitions and aviation fuel, causing a violent explosion to erupt, ripping the ship clean in half and bringing down one of the Ju-88s flying over the top. Clouded by a thick column of black smoke, orange fire and cooked-off munitions, what's left of Waimarama sinks. Her oil streams into the sea, the water around her igniting into an inferno. To her stern, merchantman Melbourne Star, showered with flaming debris, takes evasive action around the wreckage. Destroyer HMS Ledbury surges forward into the fiery water, collecting what survivors of Waimarama she can, lest they burn to death. Meanwhile, The attack continues. 4 Ju-88s make their runs against the merchantman Rochester Castle, dropping 4 torpedoes into the water. They race towards the merchantman, which turns hard to avoid them. With her skipper's quick thinking, all torpedoes miss. As the Ju-88s escape the anti-aircraft fire, Burrough knows his prospects are bleak. With so many hours left in the day, he will remain under constant attack. In the distance, however, is a reassuring sound. A growing rumble fills the sky, the roar of twin Bristol Taurus radial engines, a sound of hope. RAF Malta Command has arrived, with its mighty hard-as-nails twin-engined heavy fighter, the Bristol Beaufighter, and its sleek, elegant but deadly interceptor, the Supermarine Spitfire. The Operation Pedestal convoy has finally arrived within range of the RAF's land-based fighters. Burrough reorganises his convoy again into 2 columns, with the 2 light cruisers Kenya and Charybdis leading port and starboard columns of merchantmen, and his destroyers in line astern on each of the convoy's beams. Yet again, the convoy's radars ping approaching enemy aircraft. This time, 5 miles ahead of the convoy, 12 SM-79 and SM-84 bombers drop a series of motor bombers, autonomous torpedoes that circle in the convoy's path. With some quick thinking, Burrough adjusts his convoy's course and avoids them entirely. The Italian bombers begin to withdraw, but the Beaufighters and Spitfires pounce on them. The Beaufighters maul the bombers, with their 4 20mm cannons and 6 machine guns. Diving in from behind, one SM-84 is ripped to shreds and plummets into the sea below. The Spitfires join the assault, and several more Italian bombers sustain serious damage. With the fighters engaged, 15 Ju-87s head towards the oiler Ohio. Spotting them, Burrough orders his own destroyer HMS Ashanti alongside Ohio, to offer her his entire complement of anti-aircraft fire. If Ohio is to be in danger, then so is he. The Stukas dive and release their bombs at the pair. The munitions splash into the water around the 2 ships. Ashanti and Ohio are both covered in a dashing of seawater, and another brave Stuka dives unfazed and releases its bomb dangerously close to Ohio's bow, before being hit by Ashanti's anti-aircraft fire, sending it smashing onto Ohio's deck. Witnessing one Stuka succumb to the barrage, the remaining Stukas begin their escapes. Spitfires glide onto their tail to punish them, and Dorset's gunners accidentally shoot down one of the chasing fighters. As the Stukas fall out of range, another wave of 9 Ju-88s begins its approach. They aim for the light cruiser Kenya. Their bombs straddle the ship as she deftly avoids them. Their ordnance expended, these Junkers follow the Stukas' path, as Beaufighters and Spitfires harass their withdrawal. Burroughs' force is offered no respite, as the radar operators aboard AA cruiser HMS Charybdis pick up yet another 20 Ju-88s to the east and 18 Ju-87s to the west. As both enemy formations approach, fresh Beaufighters and Spitfires arrive on station, tearing out to intercept the incoming waves. As bombers approach their targets, their fighter escorts detach in a desperate attempt to fend off the marauding RAF fighters, and a dogfight ensues. Axis and Allied fighters alike exchange damage, but none are shot down. The engagement buys the bombers enough time to complete their attack. Over Ohio, passing through a squall of anti-aircraft fire, one Ju-88 releases its payload before it is consumed by black clouds of anti-aircraft fire. As the bomber falls, its payload hits the ship's deck, failing to explode just before the aircraft's carcass strikes Ohio's starboard bow, causing minor damage. More Ju-88s drop their bombs over Ohio as they pass through the hellfire thrown into the sky above her. Ohio steams on, weaving as best she can whilst plumes of water skyrocket around her. The bombs detonate dangerously close to Ohio's hull, buckling her plates and causing flooding. This flooding quickly renders her immobile as her boiler rooms are consumed. RAF fighters continue to engage the enemy, forcing many bombers to drop their payloads early so that they might escape. With the number of bombers decreasing, and with Ohio's importance in mind, Burrough dispatches destroyers Bramham, Ledbury and Penn to form a defensive cordon around her as she glides to a halt. Further Ju-88s continue to pass over Ohio, but this time target Rochester Castle and Dorset. Both ships manoeuvre whilst bombs splash into the water around them. No hits are scored, but a near miss reduces Dorset to just one engine. The bombers withdraw, chased at the hip by Beaufighters and Spitfires. Burrough again takes stock after another testing air attack. Ohio and her escorts fall further away from the main body of the convoy, leaving it with a weaker anti-aircraft screen. Yet another air attack is incoming, as 12 SM-79 Sparvieros approach from the south. With Allied fighters off to the north, these bombers have an unharassed approach. Commander Edward Gibbs of HMS Pathfinder leads his ship out of formation and sails directly towards the approaching bombers. Making flank speed, and with her armaments ablaze, the destroyer races south and quickly attracts the attention of the Sparvieros. Several break from their attack, and instead approach Pathfinder from multiple directions. They close in on the destroyer, release their torpedoes, and bank away. The torpedoes race in towards her. Pathfinder tears into evasive maneuvers and weaves through the waves, avoiding each and every torpedo. All the while, her anti-aircraft guns continue to put up a violent torrent of lead, destroying one of the bombers. The rest of the Sparvieros remain on their course, but are pounced on by Spitfires, who have raced to the south to intervene. Only one is able to release its torpedo. The rest are forced to turn away under heavy fighter attack. The lone torpedo races towards Port Chalmers but does not find the target. With every air attack survived, the convoy sails closer to Malta, affording increasingly better top cover from the RAF fighters on the island. Burrough dispatches HMS Ledbury to retrace the convoy's steps and collect any surviving stragglers from the day's attacks. He also orders Bramham and Penn to escort the trailing Dorset and Ohio. Burrough continues, pressing on towards a swept channel through the minefields surrounding Malta. Awaiting him at the channel's mouth are the ships of the 17th Minesweeping Flotilla, HMS Speed, Hebe, Hythe and Rye. The two forces meet, and Admiral Burrough duly hands over control of Melbourne Star, Port Chalmers and Rochester Castle to the awaiting minesweepers. Force X's role in escorting these merchantmen is over. It now falls to Lieutenant Commander Henry Jerome of the 17th Minesweeping Flotilla to guide the merchantmen the final miles of their long and dangerous journey into the Grand Harbour of Valletta. The two cruisers and 4 destroyers of Burrough's Force X turn around to begin their long journey back to Gibraltar. Lieutenant Commander Jerome guides the 3 merchantmen through Malta's minefields, while Spitfires loiter overhead, ready to pound any attackers. After 2 hours of transiting the narrow channels carved through the minefields, untouched by enemy attack, the first of Operation Pedestal's merchantmen finally reach the imposing entrance to the Grand Harbour, behind which lies the island's capital, Valletta. Lining the harbour's fortress walls, palisades and docksides, thousands of onlookers cheer their arrival, as live music fills the air to commemorate the occasion. However, merchantmen Ohio, Dorset and Brisbane Star remain in perilous danger. As Burrough retraces his steps, he soon reaches the trailing Ohio under the escort of the destroyer Penn and a flight of Spitfires. As they pass by, Burrough, aboard a shanty, signals to Ohio's skipper, Captain Dudley Mason, "I am proud to have known you." Burrough's signal recognises the extreme lengths that Ohio's captain and crew have gone through to keep their ship afloat and on track. 200 miles to the west, the damaged Brisbane Star continues to forge her way onto Malta, entirely unprotected, having been separated from the convoy by a torpedo attack that compromised her hull and reduced her speed. Also west of Malta, the merchantman Dorset finds herself in a precarious position. With damage from an earlier air attack leaving her with only 1 engine, and subsequent air attacks having started a fire in her aft hold, Dorset has fallen far behind the convoy, and with no power to work the pumps, effective firefighting is impossible. Her skipper looks towards scuttling the ship. His plans, however, are quickly dismissed upon the arrival of HMS Bramham, which looks to take the ailing merchantman under tow. After several attempts to take Dorset under tow, the idea is eventually put to bed, following a raid by 2 Ju-88s that, though unsuccessful, highlight the vulnerable position both ships are in. Not wanting to risk his own destroyer, Bramham's captain, Lieutenant Commander Edward Baines, radios ahead to Flag Officer in Charge Malta Dockyard, Vice Admiral Ralph Letham, for permission to scuttle Dorset. Admiral Letham replies, and outright refuses the proposal on the grounds of the importance of the ship's cargo, leaving the two ships in a serious predicament. This predicament, however, would have to wait, as Bramham receives orders from Lieutenant Commander James Swain, Baines' senior aboard HMS Penn, to temporarily leave Dorset and aid in providing escort to the far more important oiler Ohio. Though Bramham would later return to Dorset and attempt to aid her once more, her fate is already sealed. With the fire roaring in her aft section growing to become uncontrollable, her hull settling in the water, and a subsequent air attack by 4 Ju-88 striking her deck, little can be done to rescue the ship. Merchantman Dorset descends beneath the water's surface. Bramham sails to join Penn and Ohio. Like Dorset, Ohio has suffered frequent damage at the hands of enemy air attacks over the course of her journey to Malta, the most recent of which has left her with only emergency steering in operation. As a result of her growing list of issues, Ohio is some 2 hours from the exchange point with the minesweepers, and 4 hours from Malta. Under the command of HMS Penn, countless attempts have been made to tow the oiler, but each effort has been in vain, as her ripped open hull plates provide too much resistance to bring the ship to move. Minesweeper HMS Rye arrives to help. They are able to bring Ohio to a snail's pace and little more. Their efforts are quickly put in jeopardy as a new formation of 8 Ju-88 bombers strike at the small force. Penn slips her tow rope and manoeuvres to fight off the attack, but despite her best efforts, one 250 kg bomb strikes Ohio, killing 1 gun crew and further damaging her engines. Another near miss wrecks the ship's rudder. With Ohio already motionless and without power, and the added challenge of contending with her immobility and how low she sits in the water, fears quickly grow that Ohio, with her critical cargo of fuel, will sink. But, despite all odds, the British-crewed American oiler defiantly remains afloat, inspiring the ships around her with the confidence that she might be able to continue. HMS Bramham joins Penn and Rye in a renewed effort to tow the oiler, and they begin to make noticeable progress. That is, until HMS Rye's towing rope breaks. With everyone exhausted after another heavy day under attack, Lieutenant Commander Swain abandons the efforts for the evening. This small but tough force will still be at sea for another day of air attack tomorrow. Daylight breaks on the 14th of August and brings with it the terrible sight of clear and perfect skies. Brisbane Star continues her journey east to Malta. She is momentarily harassed by a lone Ju-88, but by afternoon she will become the 4th merchantman to arrive in Malta. Where Brisbane Star has finally had some good luck, Ohio's saga continues. The clear skies bring with them a renewed threat of enemy air attacks. The defiant force of ships is bolstered by the arrival of destroyer HMS Ledbury, who has been sailing east with survivors from Waimarama and Melbourne Star. Joining with Penn and Rye, Ledbury deposits her rescued sailors aboard Ohio, where they man crucial positions to keep her afloat. The Royal Navy escorts again begin to tow the bolstered Ohio towards safety. The hard work drags on. Minesweeper HMS Speedy arrives from Malta, and Lieutenant Commander Jerome of the 17th Minesweeping Flotilla transfers onto Ohio, in preparation to directly guide her through Malta's outlying minefields and into the harbour's entrance. In the distance, however, lookouts spot an advancing formation of 9 Italian Ju-87s nearing their position. Lieutenant Commander Jerome orders the towing effort to cease, and the ships ready themselves to fight back. Determined not to allow their merchantmen to fall now, the Royal Navy destroyers and minesweepers form a defensive perimeter around Ohio. They leave sufficient distance to defend her, but also so that should she detonate, they themselves will not be taken out in the explosion. The small warships are unlikely to pack the defensive AA firepower to stop this final air assault. The weakened AA fire does not seem enough as it erupts skyward. The Ju-87s drone closer and prepare to drop their bombs on the crippled Ohio. However, the Italian bombers are unaware of the Supermarine Spitfires screaming in behind them. Their elliptical wings silhouetting against the blue sky, flame erupts from the guns of the RAF fighters. The attack is violent, and the elegant fighters glide skyward again. One Ju-87 is shot down, another is hit by AA fire from Ohio itself, and the remaining 7 flee. The Spitfires pursue the fleeing Italian Ju-87s, but the ship's respite is brief, as another wave of 8 Ju-87s approach. Again, the ships create a barrier around Ohio, and Bramham steams aggressively into the attacking aircraft to break up the formation. This time, without the aid of the Spitfires, who are chasing off the previous wave, the ships fire a desperate barrage of anti-aircraft fire into the sky, none more effectively than HMS Bramham, whose fire disrupts several of the Ju-87s as they begin their dives. 8 bombers release their bombs towards Ohio, but the little escorts have done enough. All bombs miss. With the danger averted, Lieutenant Commander Jerome resumes the towing effort. With Bramham on Ohio's port, Penn on her starboard and Rye ahead, the 3 ships can muster some 6 knots, whilst Ledbury and Speedy sail nearby providing anti-aircraft escort. Despite this significant improvement in speed, and the respite from air attacks, Lieutenant Commander Swain aboard HMS Penn watches as his men, and those aboard the still struggling Ohio, lose morale out of fear of further air attack. To lighten the mood and restore the spirits of Ohio's now Anglo-Australian, New Zealander and various other nationalities crew, he plays Chattanooga Choo Choo through the ship's loudspeakers, which works a treat. For the remainder of the day and into the night, Bramham, Penn and Rye continue to tow Ohio towards Malta, with Ledbury and Speedy nearby, spotting the coastline just before sunset. As night gives way to the twilight hours of an early morning of the 15th of August, Ohio and her escorts reach the mouth of the mine-swept channel. They are greeted by a civilian tug, the vessel managing only to collide with Penn before being ordered back to Valletta, leaving the difficult task of manoeuvring through the minefield's small channel down to her existing escorts. Sailing ahead of Ohio, HMS Rye drops its towing rope and joins Speedy in searching for any rogue mines that may have strayed into the swept channel. Behind them, Bramham and Penn continue pulling Ohio along, while Ledbury is used as a makeshift tug to keep the oiler on the correct course and ensure she doesn't stray into the minefields surrounding her as she navigates the 2 corners along the swept channel. The sun rises hours later. The force is joined by the Grand Harbour's harbourmaster and chief pilot, who transfer aboard Ohio, bringing with them 3 civilian tugs to finish the job. At 8 AM, after 6 hours in the minefields, on the day the Maltese called the Feast of Santa Maria, a day of religious celebration and feasting, Ohio finally reaches the safety of the Grand Harbour, and with it, its much-needed cargo of fuel. Cheered on by thousands of people lining the fortress walls and a brass band, Lieutenant Hill aboard the destroyer Ledbury would describe this as the most wonderful moment of my life. The last of Operation Pedestal's merchantmen has arrived, and with it a lifeline. Within a matter of hours, Ohio's precious cargo is hastily offloaded, stored, and quickly distributed across the island by a Herculean civilian and military effort. The supplies from the Melbourne Star, Port Chalmers, Rochester Castle and Brisbane Star follow swiftly. Operation Pedestal has been a success with heavy losses. The 5 merchantmen that make it to Malta carry 32,000 tons of war-extending material. This lifeline will keep Malta and its people in the fight for several more months. In battering their way through the extremely hostile Mediterranean to Malta, the Royal Navy has lost the aircraft carrier HMS Eagle, 2 light cruisers and 1 destroyer, with 19 aircraft of the Royal Air Force and Fleet Air Arm destroyed. 5 of the convoy's 14 merchant ships reached their objective. 2 Axis submarines have been sunk, with another damaged. The heavy cruiser Bolzano and light cruiser Muzio Attendolo are seriously damaged. Several torpedo boats have been sunk or damaged, and over 70 aircraft lost. In the months that follow Operation Pedestal, Operations Stone Age, Portcullis and Quadrangle deliver a further 175,000 tons of supplies. These allow the Royal Air Force and repositioned Royal Navy assets to go on the offensive once more against Axis convoys destined to the crucial North African theatre, denying Erwin Rommel the supplies needed to sustain his Africa Corps. Though Operation Pedestal has been costly, to Prime Minister Winston Churchill the sacrifice is an unfortunate necessity to maintain Malta's crucial part in the war. Churchill would go on to write that the reward justified the price exacted. Vice Admiral Neville Seifert was proud of the performance of his sailors under deadly circumstances. He wrote, "The losses suffered were regrettably heavy, and the number of merchant ships which reached Malta was disappointingly small. Nevertheless, they continued undaunted and determined, and fighting their way through the many and heavy attacks. The steadfast manner in which these ships pressed on their way to Malta through all attacks, answering every manoeuvre order like a well-trained fleet unit, was a most inspiring sight. Many of these fine men and their ships were lost, but the memory of their conduct will remain an inspiration to all who were privileged to sail with them." Historian Douglas Porch writes of the importance of Malta. "The Mediterranean was not the decisive theatre of the war, but it was the pivotal theatre, a requirement for Allied success, with Malta a vital piece in the British campaign against Rommel's supply line." Though reduced by some historians such as Max Hastings to a mere thorn in the Axis side, most agree that Malta demonstrated herself to be more than that. The very survival of the small island nation stood as a symbol of defiance to the Axis, and one of resilience and hope to the wider war effort. So long as Malta stood firm, the Mediterranean would remain contested, and supplies would be harassed and sunk on their journey across to Libya. But, had she fallen, the prospects for the victorious North African and eventually Sicilian and Italian campaigns may have looked drastically different.